All right, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive into a fascinating trend we're seeing in Denmark. Specifically, we're looking at international postdocs.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing is that we have this data from Danish industry, or DI as they're known.
Right.
And they found this staggering statistic
Yeah.
that 76% of new postdoc positions in Denmark over the last 5 years have actually gone to people from outside the country.
Wow.
So that's 841 out of 11,103.
Yeah, that's a huge number.
It really is.
It's really striking.
So we're going to kind of dive into this a little bit and look at what's driving this influx of international talent.
Yeah.
What are some of the potential benefits and challenges? And then also, is Denmark doing enough to try and retain these people?
Right.
And then also, what does this tell us about kind of the global competition for talent?
Yeah, I think this is a really fascinating case study that reflects some of the broader trends we're seeing in the research world.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get too far into it, maybe just for people who aren't super familiar with the ins and outs of academia,
Sure.
can you just give us a quick rundown of what a postdoc position actually is in Denmark?
Yeah, so a postdoc position in Denmark, it's a temporary research position
Okay.
that typically follows a PhD.
Right.
And it's really an opportunity for researchers to deepen their expertise,
Okay.
conduct independent research,
Got it.
and also gain some additional skills, maybe in teaching,
Yeah.
project management.
So it's really like that next step
It's
after
the-
you finish that big dissertation.
Yeah, you've got your PhD.
You need to kind of figure out, okay, what's next?
Right, you've done a lot of research under the supervision of others.
Yep.
And now it's your time to kind of
Branch out.
branch out. Exactly.
Yeah.
And in Denmark, postdoc positions are usually governed by what's called the ministerial order.
Okay.
So there's some specific guidelines
Mm-hmm.
in terms of their duration, which is typically up to 4 years. And also their focus, which is, as I mentioned, primarily on research,
Gotcha.
although teaching can be a part of it as well.
Interesting. So there is that flexibility there.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so that's really helpful just to kind of set the stage.
Sure.
So we know that postdocs are becoming increasingly common in Denmark.
Yeah.
The data actually shows a 32% jump in the number of postdoc positions over the past 5 years.
Wow.
Which is way higher than the growth we're seeing in other academic positions.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
So what do you think is fueling this postdoc explosion? Like, what's making these positions so much more common?
Well, I think there are a few factors at play here.
Okay.
First of all, Denmark has a fantastic international reputation for high-quality research,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in fields like, technology, the natural sciences,
Yeah.
healthcare.
Makes sense.
So that's a big draw.
Yeah.
Then you've also got the funding situation.
Yeah.
Denmark has some pretty attractive funding opportunities for research,
Right.
both from government sources and also from private foundations.
So there's money there to support these positions. That
Exactly.
makes a big difference.
And I think also you can't underestimate the quality of life in Denmark.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a pretty nice place to live.
It's a very appealing place to live and work.
Yeah, for sure.
So, it's kind of a combination of factors.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty winning combination.
Yeah,
High quality research
Yeah.
funding and a great place to live.
that's right.
Now let's talk about that 76% figure for international postdocs.
Okay.
Is that consistent across all the different research fields, or are there certain areas where it's even more pronounced?
Well, as you might expect, given what we just talked about,
Okay.
the trend is most noticeable in those fields where Denmark is already really strong.
Right. So like technology and natural sciences.
Exactly.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that we're also seeing a significant increase in postdoc positions in the social sciences and humanities.
Oh, interesting.
Although it's worth noting that those fields are starting from a smaller base.
Okay, so the overall numbers are still lower.
Yeah.
But the growth is there.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And even within those fields, the majority of new postdocs are coming from outside of Denmark.
So it's not just the sciences that are attracting this global talent.
That's right. It seems that Denmark's research environment has something to offer across a wide range of disciplines.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Okay, so clearly Denmark's doing something right when it comes to attracting international researchers. But the big question is, are they doing enough to keep those researchers in Denmark once their postdoc contracts are up?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right, because if they're not,
Yeah.
then Denmark's basically just investing in training a global workforce
Yeah.
that will eventually take their skills and knowledge elsewhere.
That's a very real risk.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we start to see some potential challenges.
Yeah.
You know, attracting international talent is one thing.
Right.
But retaining it is a whole other ballgame.
Yeah, it's a long game.
Exactly.
So what are some of the things that Denmark needs to be thinking about if they want to hold on to these talented researchers?
Well, we need to think about things like career pathways,
Okay.
integration support,
Uh-huh.
and really the long-term opportunities that are available to these researchers.
So creating an environment where they can not only build a career, but also build a life.
Exactly. You want them to feel like they have a future in Denmark.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because let's face it, if there aren't clear pathways to advance their careers,
Yeah.
they're probably going to start looking elsewhere.
And who could blame them?
Exactly.
So it seems like this issue of attracting and retaining international postdocs is bringing up some interesting and maybe even conflicting perspectives.
Yeah.
For example, we have Danish industry who are obviously very interested in this talent pool.
Of course.
They see these highly skilled researchers as a potential asset for businesses and for the economy as a whole.
Right. They're looking at it from a more economic perspective.
Right.
How can we leverage this talent to boost innovation and competitiveness?
Exactly.
And they're advocating for smoother transitions from academia into the private sector.
So making it easier for researchers to move into industry roles.
Exactly.
Okay.
On the other end, you have DM University.
Right, the Union for Academic Professionals.
Exactly.
So their perspective is going to be a little different.
Right. They're more focused on the academic side of things.
Right.
And they're expressing concerns about the lack of clear career paths within academia itself.
Okay, so they're worried that there aren't enough opportunities for these researchers to stay in academia.
Exactly.
And they're particularly concerned about the challenges faced by international researchers.
Right.
So it sounds like there's a bit of a tug of war going on here.
Yeah, there are definitely different perspectives on this issue.
DI wants to see this talent pool flowing into the private sector.
Yeah.
And DM University wants to make sure that there are enough opportunities for them to stay in academia.
Oh, exactly.
So where do the universities themselves stand on all of this?
Well, Universities Denmark, which represents all 8 Danish universities,
Okay.
is very much in favor of internationalization.
Hmm.
They recognize that attracting top global talent is absolutely essential for maintaining Denmark's position as a research leader.
So they're on board with bringing in the best minds from around the world.
Absolutely.
But are they actually doing anything to make sure that these researchers have the support they need to succeed?
Well, they emphasize their efforts to provide clear career pathways,
Okay.
including the option of tenure-track positions, which were introduced in 2019.
So that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it shows that they're thinking about the long-term prospects of these researchers.
Right.
They also highlight their commitment to providing a supportive environment for international researchers.
Okay.
So that includes things like assistance with visas and housing and even language learning.
So they're trying to make the transition to living and working in Denmark as smooth as possible.
Exactly. They're recognizing that it's not just about the research.
Right.
It's about the whole experience.
Yeah, it's about making people feel welcome and supported.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the situation in Denmark.
Hmm.
But I'm curious, is this influx of international postdocs unique to Denmark?
Well, it's interesting.
Or are we seeing similar trends in other countries?
What we're seeing in Denmark is actually part of a much bigger global trend.
Okay.
The competition for top research talent is fierce all over the world.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Countries are realizing that research and innovation are key drivers of economic growth and progress.
So they're all trying to attract the best and brightest minds.
Exactly.
It's like a global brain race.
Yeah, it's a race to the top.
And Denmark seems to be doing pretty well in that race.
They're definitely a strong contender.
Well, this has been a fascinating overview.
Yeah.
We've looked at the data. We've explored some of the different perspectives on this issue.
And I think we've raised some really important questions
Yeah, for sure.
about the future of research.
Both in Denmark
Back-
and globally.
Absolutely.
So stick with us, because in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to delve even deeper into the implications of this trend
Can't wait.
and explore some potential solutions for ensuring that Denmark can attract and retain the best global talent.
It's going to be a fascinating discussion.
For sure.
It really is a fascinating time to be involved in research. I mean, we're seeing this kind of shift towards a more interconnected global research landscape.
Yeah, and Denmark's experience with these international postdocs is a really great example of that trend.
It is, yeah.
It seems like a really positive thing, right? This idea of the research world becoming like this giant melting pot of different ideas and perspectives.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you bring together researchers from different backgrounds and with different experiences, you can really lead to new insights and collaborations.
Right. It's like that cross-pollination thing we always talk about.
Exactly.
But I imagine there are some challenges that come with this increased globalization as well.
Yeah, there are definitely two sides to every coin.
What are some of the potential downsides that we should be thinking about?
Well, one concern is the issue of brain drain.
Okay, explain that.
So basically, you have these highly skilled researchers who come to Denmark for their postdoc.
Right.
And if they don't see a future for themselves in Denmark,
Yeah.
they might move on to other countries.
Right. Taking their skills and knowledge with them.
Exactly. And that could be a big loss for Denmark.
Yeah, especially if they've invested in training and supporting those researchers.
Right.
It's also important to consider the impact on countries that are maybe struggling to compete
Okay.
with these research powerhouses like Denmark.
So it's like we could end up widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots in the research world.
That's a risk. Yeah.
Okay, so it's this double-edged sword.
On the one hand, you have the potential for amazing breakthroughs.
Yeah, driven by these diverse perspectives and collaborations.
Right.
But on the other hand, you have this risk of exacerbating existing inequalities.
Okay, so how do we make sure that Denmark is attracting talent,
Yeah.
but also creating an environment where those researchers can actually thrive and stay in the long term?
That's the key question, and it's where things start to get really interesting.
Okay.
I think the first thing we need to look at is career pathways.
Okay.
We've talked about how there's been a big increase in postdoc positions,
Right.
but that hasn't really been matched by a similar increase in permanent academic roles.
So it's like inviting someone to this amazing party,
Yeah.
but then not giving them a place to stay when the party's over,
That's a great analogy.
and then they just end up going home.
Right. Exactly.
So what can we do to create those longer-term opportunities for researchers?
Well, I think tenure-track positions are definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay.
They offer a clearer path towards a permanent role. Right?
But I think we also need to be thinking outside of those traditional academic structures.
Okay, I like that.
What about creating more specialized postdoc programs
Yeah.
that maybe incorporate industry partnerships
Interesting.
or offering really tailored mentorship programs that connect researchers with senior leaders in their field?
So giving them the support and guidance they need to really build their careers.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
Or even establishing international research centers
Okay.
that are specifically designed to attract top talent from around the world.
Oh, I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's like creating these hubs of global collaboration.
Exactly.
But let's not forget about all the challenges that researchers face outside of academia.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
I mean, things like language barriers and cultural differences can make it really hard to integrate into a new country.
Right, especially if you're coming from a very different culture.
So what can we do to address those challenges?
Well, I think language training is crucial.
We could offer intensive Danish language courses specifically designed for researchers and also maybe cultural integration workshops, not just for the researchers themselves, but also for their families.
Oh, that's a good point, because often it's the families that really struggle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even just having those social events and welcome activities.
Yeah, creating those opportunities for people to connect
Right.
and build relationships.
And feel like they're part of the community.
Exactly.
And I think it's also really important for researchers to feel valued and appreciated.
Definitely.
So what about things like recognition programs or mentorship initiatives?
Yeah, those can be really powerful.
Because it's not just about the science. It's about creating an environment where people feel like they belong.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about career pathways and integration support.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about Danish industry's perspective.
Okay.
They're really keen on connecting this international talent pool with the needs of Danish businesses. So how can we make that happen?
Well, one idea is to create a national platform
Okay.
that showcases the expertise of these international postdocs. So Danish companies can easily find potential collaborators or even future employees.
So it's like a matchmaking service for researchers and businesses.
Exactly.
I like it.
We could also incentivize those joint research projects between universities and companies.
Okay, so providing funding and support to encourage collaboration.
Exactly.
Because ultimately we want to see those ideas and that research being translated into real-world solutions.
That's the goal.
But all of this is going to require resources.
Yes.
Both financial resources and political will.
How do we convince policymakers that research and innovation should be a top priority?
Right, especially when there are so many other competing demands on the budget.
It's a challenge.
So how do we make the case?
Well, I think we need to emphasize the long-term benefits of investing in research.
Okay.
It's not just a cost.
Right.
It's an investment in Denmark's future.
Sure. It's an investment in the future.
Exactly.
Because when you invest in research, you're investing in innovation.
Yeah.
And that leads to economic growth, which in turn creates more opportunities for investment.
It's a virtuous cycle.
Exactly.
But we also need to make sure that Denmark remains an attractive destination for researchers.
Right, because the competition is fierce.
It is, yeah.
So what can Denmark do to stand out from the crowd?
Well, I think Denmark already has a lot going for it.
Okay.
The high quality of life, the strong social safety net,
Yeah.
the focus on work-life balance.
Those are all big pluses.
They are.
But we can't just assume that those things are enough.
Right. We need to be proactive.
What else can we do to sweeten the deal?
Well, I think we need to be more competitive when it comes to research funding.
Okay.
We need to offer those more flexible career paths,
Right.
and we need to create an even more welcoming and inclusive environment.
So it's about constantly striving to improve. Recognizing that attracting and retaining top talent is a continuous process.
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
And we need to be willing to adapt and evolve.
To meet the changing needs of the research world.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about all the reasons why Denmark is becoming this hub for international researchers.
Yeah.
We've looked at some of the potential challenges and how those different perspectives from Danish industry and DM University are playing out.
Yeah, it's a complex issue.
But now let's get really practical.
Okay.
If we were in charge of designing a national strategy to make sure that Denmark can not only attract these amazing researchers, but also keep them here in the long term,
Right.
where would we even start?
Well, we've touched on some of the key areas already.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that a really successful strategy needs to be multifaceted.
Okay.
It's kind of like building a house.
Okay.
You need that strong foundation,
Yeah.
those solid walls.
And a roof that doesn't leak.
Exactly.
So let's start with the foundation.
Career pathways.
Yeah. We can't just bring these researchers here with all these promises of exciting projects and then just leave them hanging when their contracts are up.
So what can we do beyond those tenure track positions that we talked about? What are some other ways to create a clearer path towards a long-term career in research here in Denmark?
Well, I think we could explore creating specialized postdoc programs that actually have built-in industry partnerships.
Interesting.
So right from the start, those researchers are getting that exposure and building those connections.
Okay.
We could also develop some really targeted mentorship programs that connect those postdocs with the real leaders in their field.
So they have someone to guide them.
Exactly, someone who can show them the ropes.
And help them navigate the system.
And I think another really interesting idea is to establish these international research centers.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier. I love that idea.
Really exciting. Because you're bringing together those top researchers from all over the world, and it creates that sense of community from the very beginning.
Right.
But we can't just focus on the research itself. We have to think about all the practical aspects of living and working in a new country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Language can be a huge barrier.
Definitely.
And even those small cultural differences can make people feel really isolated sometimes.
Right. It can be a real challenge to adjust to a new culture.
So how can we make that transition a little bit easier?
Well, I think intensive Danish language courses are essential.
Okay.
And maybe even tailoring those courses specifically for researchers.
Right. So they're learning the vocabulary that's relevant to their work.
Exactly.
And I think those cultural integration workshops could be really helpful too.
Yeah.
Not just for the researchers, but for their families as well.
Absolutely. Because often it's the families that really struggle.
Yeah.
And even just having those simple welcome events where international researchers can connect with their Danish colleagues.
Right.
Learn about the local customs.
And maybe get some tips on how to navigate the Danish bureaucracy.
Exactly. Those little things can make a big difference.
And I think it's also important to just make people feel appreciated.
Yeah, definitely.
So what about those recognition programs we talked about earlier?
Or those mentorship initiatives where we're connecting international researchers with established figures in their field.
Yeah, those could be really impactful.
Right. It's about showing them that we value their contributions.
Right.
That we're invested in their success.
It's about creating an environment where people feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about career pathways and integration support.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about Danish industry's perspective on this.
Okay.
They see this huge potential in connecting this pool of international researchers with the needs of Danish businesses.
Yeah, they're really eager to tap into that talent pool.
So how can we make that connection happen?
Well, I think having that national platform where we're showcasing the expertise of those international postdocs could be really valuable.
Yeah, making it easy for companies to find the researchers they need.
Exactly.
And we could also provide funding and support for those joint research projects between universities and businesses.
Yeah, creating those incentives for collaboration.
Because ultimately, we want to see those research findings being translated into real-world applications.
Right, that's the goal.
But all of this is going to require a real commitment
Yeah,
from both the government and from the universities.
absolutely.
So how do we make sure that research and innovations stay at the top of the agenda?
Even with all those other competing priorities,
Right, because money doesn't grow on trees.
it doesn't, unfortunately.
So how do we make the case for investing in research?
I think we need to emphasize that long-term vision.
Okay.
We need to make it clear that investing in research isn't just a cost,
Right.
it's an investment in Denmark's future.
Mhm.
And it's an investment that will pay off in the long run.
But it's not just about the money.
Right.
We need to make sure that Denmark continues to be an attractive place for those top researchers.
Yeah, we can't just rest on our laurels.
Right, because the competition is only going to get tougher.
Exactly.
So what can Denmark do to really stand out and attract those best and brightest minds?
Well, I think Denmark already has a lot going for it.
Yeah.
That high quality of life, the strong social safety net,
The focus on work-life balance?
those are all huge advantages.
They are.
But we can't become complacent.
We need to keep pushing forward.
We need to offer competitive research funding,
Right.
create those more flexible career paths.
And keep working to create a welcoming and inclusive environment for all researchers.
That's how we'll stay ahead of the game.
So it's really about recognizing that attracting and keeping those top researchers is an ongoing effort.
It is.
It's not a one-time thing,
It's a marathon.
and we need to be willing to adapt and change.
To keep pace with the global research landscape.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground today.
From the data to the different perspectives to the potential solutions.
We've really explored the complexities of this trend of international postdocs in Denmark.
And I think it's given us a lot to think about.
It's clear that Denmark has this incredible opportunity to become a true global leader in research.
But it's going to take a concerted effort.
From government, from the universities.
And from researchers themselves.
To create the kind of environment where those brilliant minds can thrive.
I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Me too. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We hope it sparked some ideas and inspired you to think about the future of research.
Both in Denmark
and beyond.